Hello, my name is Carl. Welcome to my workshop and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm back from work now, and as is usual when I come back, I like to ease in with a slightly slower paced video than usual. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at how I refurbished a Mercer 10ths clock gauge. Now, it's something that I've had for quite a long time. I bought it a while ago, and I did the refurbishment work on it some time ago, and it's been languishing in a box waiting for me to get back to it. So I decided that as a little project to get back into the workshop, I'd finish this gauge off. So I'll bring you in a minute and we'll have a look and see what I've been up to. Okay, so we're on the bench. You can probably hear the sound of water dripping. It's really raining outside, siling down as my grandma used to say. And winter is definitely upon us. The heating is now on in the workshop. So let's have a look at this clock gauge, or DTI, whatever you want to call it. Now, this is something of a departure from the milling machine restoration. It's a little bit from the sublime to the ridiculous, really. Going from one end of the restoration spectrum to the other, essentially, in terms of the scale of the parts that we're dealing with. Now, this clock that you see in front of you in sort of kind of partially dismantled, or partially reassembled, I should say, really, is something that I was working on about 18 months ago, and it has been sitting in a cardboard box with all the parts in lots of small sealed bags, waiting for me to get round to finishing it off. And I have had a bit of an issue with finishing it off, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, before I go on to that, I'll show you the gauge itself and the various parts, and what the problems were with it and why I had to take it apart in the first place. So I bought this gauge. It's a Mercer. I'll just show you the show you the dial here. I'll just adjust the focus. So that's a Mercer 10ths gauge that we're working on, and you can see there part of the dial, and that dial has got two small locating pegs on the back of it. It's brass. So it's a Mercer gauge, and I'll bring it up now to show you. So this is the main body, if you like, of the gauge, and you can see here you've got the main spindle that the main hand goes on, and the secondary spindle for the secondary hand. And there you can see the pivots. So I'll rotate this round so you can see the internal workings of it, and show you what the problems were with the unit and why I had to dismantle it. I had actually used it for a little while after I bought it. I bought it off of eBay, and I had used it, but it was quite sticky. It was usable, but wasn't always returning very sharply, and you know, it did what it was supposed to do, but it just was a little bit unsatisfactory. So I thought I would take it apart and give it a good clean and see if I could find out if there were any issues with it. Now, the man that you need to be watching and listening to when it comes to servicing dial gauges or any type of measuring instrumentation, really, is a man by the name of Mr. Bob Dixon. Now, Bob is a friend of the great John Mills of Double Boost fame, and he made a series of videos. I think there's about 5 or 6 films which show the dismantling and cleaning and repairing and reassembling of various different types of DTIs, clock gauges, and I think some verniers and micrometers as well. And I've had some dealings with Bob in the past, in that I have sent him some items that I have received from various places, auction sites, or you know, car boot sales, that type of thing, and he's done the business with them and made them as good as new. So yeah, he is the main man to go to for this type of thing. He is what I would regard as an authority on the subject, and it was through watching his films that I got the courage up to have a go at doing this. So I'll bring you in a bit closer now and we can have a look at this mechanism. Let's just get the focus in a bit. Right, so I'll get something to point with, which will be a small a pick. So what we've got inside here, if I can get this in, here is the main return spring on this pivot lever. This is the spindle, which has a rack cut into it, which you can just about see if I can get it in there. There we are, there's the rack. And then you've got the movement inside there, so the various gear wheels, which mesh with the rack and transmit the motion of the rack to the main hand and the secondary hand, giving us the indication that we need of the incremental movement as the plunger moves in and out of the spindle. So here we have the hairspring, and the purpose of the hairspring is to, as far as I am aware, or as I understand it, the purpose of the hairspring is to provide a preload on the gears to essentially create a zero backlash situation. So as we move the spindle in and out, if I can get my hand on it, there we are. It's quite difficult working through the camera. You can see that hairspring winds up there as we move the mechanism. And as far as I'm aware, as I say, that puts it's not a return spring, that's putting a preload on those gears to prevent backlash. The main return spring is, as I said, is this one, this baby down here. Right, so what was wrong with this when I took it apart? Well, it had been oiled up to an inch of its life. There was a lot of sticky oil inside it that had kind of gone a bit rancid and a bit sticky, as it tends to, and I think they'd used the wrong kind of oil. As I said about Bob Dixon earlier, he will mention in his videos that you should only ever use instrument oil, which I think is something like 10 to 14 centistokes. It's quite thin stuff, and it is specifically designed for use inside of DTIs and micrometers and that type of thing. So it was quite sticky, quite oily, quite mucky inside here. And so I dismantled the unit and I cleaned all the components. And one of the things I noticed before I dismantled it was when I operated the mechanism, the hairspring, as you can see here, which moves obviously when you operate the spindle, it obviously it contracts and expands again as the mechanism moves. What was happening to that was it was bunching up, and it was riding the actual coils of the spring were riding over one another and forming a cone, which was kind of starting to come up and contact this plate here. I'll try and give you a better view of that so you can see what that was like. So I don't know if there's enough light. You can just about see in there where that spring sits, and it was bunching up into a cone and contacting the bearing plate there. Now what that was doing was, as you released the spindle, moved it down back the opposite way to take the tension off the spring, the spring wasn't returning to the position that you see it in now. It was the leaves of the spring wouldn't slide over each other very well when it was in that coned up position, so it wouldn't go back to the state it's in now. And it took me a little while to work out why that was. Eventually it would go back if you kind of jiggled the mechanism enough. You could get the the coils to actually slide over one another and go back to that position. And it didn't always do it. It was relatively intermittent, but I would say probably 5 times out of 10, 50% of the time it would do it. You just had to catch it at the right moment or at the right position, and it would do it. So that was a bit of an issue. So once I dismantled the mechanism, I discovered that there was a kink in this spring, and it was right down at the base here, just where it attaches to. You can just about see there, look, where it comes through, where it attaches to this king post, if you like, or this standoff that this plate is attached to. And there was a kink in it, and I managed to straighten out that kink with a pair of two pairs of tweezers, actually, one to hold the spring and the other one to manipulate it, and I managed to straighten out that kink. And once I'd done that, it made the spring sit differently, so that there was a more uniform gap, like you can see there now, between all the leaves, whereas before that kink had kind of caused the spring to sort of sit, this top part here was sitting touching this one, and that had then messed up the whole spacing of all the rest of them. And that's what was causing, or certainly what appeared to be causing, this coning up motion that I've been talking about. So when I took that kink out, that solved that problem. So how did I take this all apart? Well, the first thing I had to do was to get the bezel off, and I'll show you basically how that happened. I'll just alter the focus again. Right, so put this down with the mechanism down like that. Now, many of these gauges come apart through the front. So basically, where the hands are, where I'm pointing there with the pick, is where the hands, the primary hand and the secondary hand, would be on these two little shafts. Normally they come out forwards towards you, but this Mercer one isn't like that at all. It doesn't operate like that at all. Basically, you have to take the back off, which is this. Here's the back. So I remove the back first of all to reveal the internal workings, and then I realized that these fingers, let me show you, I'll zoom in again. These fingers, there's one there, and there should be one there, and I'll talk about why there isn't in a moment. What they do is they slide out slightly. They're move in a slot, and they're slightly slid out the way to the outboard edge of the periphery of the gauge, and they engage in slots in the bezel. Now here is the bezel with the chapter ring. Just quickly go through that with you. The chapter ring comes out. It's actually held in place by a it's got a little peg there which prevents it from rotating, so that's kind of like a key, if you like, an anti-rotation device. But if I turn that over, you can see, I'll take the chapter ring out and you can see much more easily. Sorry for the focus. There's a groove inside there. Can you see that? Let's just take that zoom out. You can see the groove there, look. Those fingers that I just showed you, these ones here, this one and the one that should be there, they sit inside that groove. So in order to remove the bezel, I had to retract these, and I'll show you how I did that now. Right, so we're looking inside the gauge again, and we're focused right in. You can see one of the slots there that I was talking about, that I showed you at the front, that the finger sits in, that holds the bezel in place. Now if I rotate this round to the next one in line, you can see there, just about, there is a small slotted screw, or slot-headed screw, and if I rotate it round a bit more, you'll see just underneath the hairspring there's another one. Now those slot-headed or slotted head screws had to be undone so that the fingers would slide back, or could be jiggled back with a screwdriver on the screw, and then the bezel could be removed. And once the bezel was removed, then I could start looking at removing the hands, and I'll show you how I did that next. Okay, so what I've done here for demonstration purposes, I've laid the bezel in its normal working position, and I've put the chapter ring and the dial on as well. Now, once I'd removed or slid back those three fingers that were holding the bezel on, I could then lift off the bezel, and that comes away, leaving the chapter ring and the dial in place. And then I could get the watch glass out of the bezel, and that was just a simple matter of popping it out, basically. And what I used to do that was this little tool here. It's a suction cup, essentially, with a ring on it. People say you can use a valve grinding tool, but I just happen to have this little thing that I don't know where it came from, actually, but it's designed for removing the screens off of mobile phones, I believe. But that was perfect for that job anyway, to remove the watch glass. So once I'd got the bezel off, then you have to imagine in this scenario that the hands are still fitted. And the way I took those off was the way that Mr. Bob Dixon actually recommends. You can get pullers for hands on clocks and clock gauges and DTIs, but the way that Bob recommends and the way I did it was to get two cotton buds. So essentially thin plastic rods. You can use thin lolly sticks or something like that as well. And then I got two precision screwdrivers, which I'll now get off camera. And I basically put them underneath the hand like this. So I'm using this, the stick of the cotton bud essentially as a fulcrum now for a lever. And I put that underneath the tips of the screwdrivers under the hand, and then just simply levered the hand off like that, and the hand came off without any difficulty whatsoever. So that's how I removed the primary and the secondary hand. So once I had those hands off, I'll just get these buds out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I was then able to remove the chapter ring and the dial. So let's just get the tweezers in and get this, because it can be quite tricky, because it does have a tendency to get stuck in the little in the locating holes. Those two locating pegs fit in two holes, one there and one there. So we'll get that out of the way for the time being. So once I had that off, I was then, oh, the other thing that was underneath there, which I haven't shown you actually, probably wondering what this is. There's a little sort of a star washer here, which is essentially a spring, and that fits over the primary spindle or primary shaft. And once you put the main dial and the chapter ring over that, that provides kind of a preload essentially. So it gives it puts a bit of force against the back of the dial and the chapter ring, and just gives you, so when you rotate the bezel, everything stays where it's supposed to. Because obviously the chapter ring is keyed to the bezel, so as you rotate it, it rotates with it. And this little spring just helps to keep everything where it's supposed to go. Right, so now I had the bezel and the hands and the chapter ring and the dial off. I was then able to start dismantling the mechanism. So I took this plate off first of all, which then enabled me to further dismantle the unit by undoing these 3 screws at the front and taking this front plate off. So that then freed up all of the gear wheels inside and the spring, the hairspring, which is when I found out I had a problem with it, with the kink that I mentioned earlier on. So I was able to strip everything out, and I cleaned everything up. And the way I did that was by I put all the gear wheels into some isopropyl alcohol in sealable bags, in freezer bags essentially. I mustn't put that down like that. One of the things with these Mercer gauges is don't put it down like that, because it will damage those spindles. And that I did have another problem related to those spindles, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So I put those gear wheels into a bag like this, just a sealable food bag essentially, with some isopropyl alcohol, and left them in there for a few days just to allow the IPA to do its work and loosen any dirt or any crud or oil that was on them. I then gave them a good clean with various different items. I used wooden toothpicks to get into all the teeth of the gears. I had a small fiberglass brush, which is generally used for, it's like a stiff fiberglass brush, and it's a precision tool. It's used for cleaning the tracks on printed circuit boards, and that's what I used for that. To clean out these pivots, I used various different things. One of the things I used was a toothpick to get in there and rotate round, just to get any dirt out of them. The toothpick was soaked in IPA, isopropyl alcohol, before I started. I also had some precision swabs, which you see me with these things earlier on. I didn't use them, but I used precision swabs, which are used again for electronic purposes. But what they look like, I don't have one to show you, but if you can think back to the COVID days, I'm sure you all had a lateral flow test, and the thing that they used to put right up your nose, almost into your brain, as it used to feel like, to take the sample. Very, very similar to that, like a very fine plastic filament with a very fine brush on the end of it, and I used them to clean the pivots as well. So once everything was nice and clean, then I reassembled it in the reverse order. So I put that plate on the front first, and then I started to put the gears into the pivots, and then the spring, and then put that plate back on. So yeah, so that was that reassembled. Now, the problem I've had, and why I haven't reassembled it more fully to use it, I will go into in a minute. But first of all, I just want to show you something, and I'm going to have to focus in on the spindles here. Right, so if I can point, I think probably the tweezers are the thing to use here, if I can find them. This is probably going to make you really seasick moving this thing around in front of the camera like this. Right, so there you can see, there is the primary spindle that the main hand pushes onto. That gives us our reading in tenths of a thou, and that is the secondary hand spindle there, and that gives readings in increments of 5 thou. Now this one, when I was using the gauge when I first bought it, that handle was wobbling around all over the place, and I discovered when I dismantled the unit that this spindle here had got bent at some point in the past, which kind of led me to believe that someone had had this apart before to either clean it or try to service it, because the only way I could think of that would have got bent, not in normal usage, well, I don't think it could have got bent in normal usage, but I think someone might have put it down like that on a bench when they were cleaning it and not realized. So in a similar way to how I sorted the problem with the hairspring, I managed to, with a pair of tweezers to hold the spindle or the shaft with the gear on, and another pair of tweezers to manipulate the shaft here, and using some magnification, I managed to straighten that out. And I wouldn't say that it was, you know, straight as a die right now, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. And if I operate the mechanism there, you can see it turning, and I think if there is any eccentricity in that, it is barely perceptible. So I think I've managed to solve that issue as well, which I'm obviously very happy about. But what we'll do now is we'll go on to look at the problem that I had, which was entirely down to my own stupidity. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So you can see all the parts here laid out, nice and tidy, nice and neat. I'm using small bags to keep everything in so I don't lose it. Yeah, right. So what happened was, when I was reassembling the gauge, I lost one of the screws. I'll just bring you in a bit closer. I lost one of the screws for the fingers that hold the bezel on, and I did try to reassemble it with only the two to see what would happen, and it was a no-go. You can see by the position of these, it's just not going to work properly. The bezel wouldn't stay on, especially with that spring that I showed you, this one here. There was no way that was going to stay on with just two, and obviously it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't right. So I needed to find another screw that would do the job, because I could not find the one that I lost. I mean, these ones are tiny, but it was even smaller than that. You can see inside. I think I showed you it already. Just one behind that spring there, absolutely minute, and almost impossible to find. And in fact, not almost impossible, it was impossible, and I didn't find it. So I had to put this thing in a box and try and find a screw that I could use to secure the finger on. Do not ask me what thread that is. I have absolutely no clue whatsoever. It was just going to be a case of finding a screw that would thread into that hole reliably and wouldn't be too slack, so that I could use it to secure the finger in place. And by dint of an absolute miracle, I've managed to find one, and I'll show you it now. So I might have to, I'll see if I can focus on this. Here we go. Just focus in a little bit. Here we go. So there it is. It's not very well focused, is it? Everything's out of focus on this channel. Let's move this out of the way. Let's see if we can get... There you go. Right, so there it is. That is the screw. Now, as I say, I left the gauge in a box, basically waiting for me to find a suitable screw to finish it off. And it kind of, if I'm honest, it got forgotten about a little bit. And I got on with other projects and other things, making massive 5 TPI lead screws and this type of thing, and dismantling milling machines and servicing electric motors and various other jobs, and it's just been lying in a box waiting for me to get back onto the job. So I was going through my my tub of small sort of sub M5, M6 and small BA screws the other day, and as I say, by dint of a miracle, I managed to find this one, and it does the job. It threads into the finger perfectly. The only thing is it's a little bit long, so we're going to have to shorten it, and that's what we're going to do now. Right, so I'm holding the small screw in the vise in the finger, and in what may well prove to be the stupidest thing I've ever done, I'm now going to try and cut this with this Dremel light. Try and hold it still with a screwdriver. Right. I think that's got it. Let's have a look. Yes, I think that's going to do the job. I think a little bit of work with a fine file and we'll be there. Just get the said fine file. I can just hold it with the screwdriver again. A little bit further out, I think. Yeah, there we are. Right, I will endeavour not to lose this one. So I'll bring you back when we're fitting it to the gauge. So there's the finger for the bezel fitted now, and I really tried to show doing that, but I just couldn't work around the camera. It was a complete no-go. I'll try and show you inside so you can see that. Let's focus in a bit, or zoom in a bit rather. So there you can see just about the new screw in position, holding the bezel locating finger. So now that that's done, I'll get on and reassemble the rest of the gauge. So prior to reassembling the DTI properly, I've lubricated it, and I didn't show that on camera because it's not very interesting really. It's quite tedious to watch, and also it's quite difficult to show properly on camera as well, and also to do a thorough job. Now, what I used to lubricate this was proper Stara instrument oil, which I managed to get hold of. And I have still one functioning kidney, so that's okay. It is quite expensive, but it's the right stuff to use, so I managed to get hold of some. To lubricate it, I just used a very small drop of oil on the point of a pick, this one in fact, and then just very gingerly put it into each one of these pivots. And I'll show you these pivots because they're quite interesting. They've got like a little countersink. I don't know if you can see that very well, but just about see it there. And some people call those oil sinks, and indeed Bob Dixon calls them that. But he's very he's very quick to point out that they shouldn't be filled with oil. Those countersinks, just the tiniest amount of oil on those pivots is all that they require. And if you can see oil, then it means that there's too much. And indeed, when I was lubricating this, I had to use a cotton bud just to soak up some of the oil because there was too much. And it's very difficult to administer exactly the right amount, but I suspect with something like a paper clip straightened out or a thin piece of wire, you could do that. I think using the pick was a bit too much, but I've managed to do it anyway. And it's lubricated now, so that's good. And I'll just show you some bits and pieces inside here that I didn't point out first of all when I was showing you the mechanism before. And there's a block in here. This block just down below the this lever, the block there is the support block for the spindle. And if I turn the gauge over, you can see on the other side that block is secured in place by that relatively large countersunk screw there, and the block has two locating dowels on it which locate into these two holes, and that's kind of a feature to keep that in position and keep it in the right place once it's just all assembled properly. So with that said, and all the lubrication done, and we'll move on to the final reassembly. Right, so we come to the assembly, which is not going to be without issue, I think. So that's the chapter ring inside the bezel, and it's held in place by that little, or it's located rather by this just about to see it there, this little pin. But if I can just, I think I can slot the bezel over the two locating dogs on one side, and then I think there's enough flex in it to kind of flip it over the other one, but we'll see. I might have to turn the camera off because it's going to be not very interesting to watch, I think. Right. Okay, right, that's something like what it needs to be. I think I just need to tighten these or push the dogs out a little bit further, the locating fingers, if you like, I think I called them before. Small Phillips screwdriver. Well, that seems to have worked. See if I can slide the other ones out a little bit more. Yeah, that has worked. Let's get this other one out. Okay. I like it. Yeah. It's not going anywhere. It's definitely secured. And it's turning as it should. Something I want to show you before I put the back on this is I've decided that it still isn't returning quite as sharply as I'd like, and I think what the problem is if I bring you in a bit, I'll zoom in a little bit, I think. Okay, so you can see here, let's move this light back a fraction, the return spring that I'm pointing at there. I think that return spring is not quite as snappy as it could be. It doesn't have quite enough tension on it, that extension spring. So that there are times when it doesn't quite pull that stop down all the way to the base there. And you know, I mean, it's not going to be moving that much really. You know, we're talking minute movements. It's not really going to be going through its full range like that at any particular time. But I have sourced a replacement for that spring. Oh, it's not in shot, there we go. I've sourced a replacement for that spring, and when it arrives I'll just take the back off the gauge and I'll fit it. But we'll carry on with the rebuild. Let's take you back to standard, there we are. And we'll bring the light back in. But that went on a lot easier than I thought it was going to, so I'm happy about that. Let's see if we can get this light in a good position for you and for me. That's not bad. Okay, right. So what we've got to do now is to fit the hands. So the secondary hand and the primary hand and the watch glass. I'll bring you in a bit, I think. Let's take you in a little bit. That's better. Right, let's get it in shot. Okay, so probably can't see very well, but there's the primary shaft, there's the secondary shaft. And off camera, I've got the bag with the hands in, so I'm just going to tweezer them out. So here is the primary hand. And yep, it looks pretty straight, it looks okay. So I'm going to push that on as close to the zero as I can manage it. Oops. Can you tell I've never done this before? It's not going to be straightforward. Right, there we are. Okay, that doesn't want to go on anymore, so we'll leave it like that. That's bizarre. Just a simple act of putting that hand on has done something to the mechanism, because it's now not wanting to return properly. That's better. Right. Not quite sure what went on there, but we'll have another look at it in a minute. So we shall put the secondary hand on now. as I say, this is not intended to be a how-to reassemble one of these units. Let's try and get this. Can you tell? Oh my goodness me. Right. Try and get that on the 25 thou there. Yep. Definitely fiddly. I'm going to bring you back when I've done this. Now, would you believe me if I told you that the second I turned that camera off, I got that secondary hand on? It's typical, isn't it? But there you go. That's what happens. So let's try and get the watch glass on now. I think this should just pop in, he says. I think I've said that before though, haven't I? Right, we're almost there. Come on, you. It just pops into a little recess in the bezel. Yep, so that's it in. There we are. And there you have it. Can you see what I mean about that return? It's still that spring, I think. That the black music wire return spring. So new one on order, and we'll get that fitted as soon as it turns up. So I can turn this onto its front now that I've got the very gingerly that I've got the hands on and I've got the watch glass on. So I'm not going to damage the hands by rotating it onto its front. And let's get the cap on. So that's the orientation for the cap. So we'll assemble, well, let's bring the screws together for the cap. There's one. There. And just get the others. Yep, you guessed it, they're all in a safe place, and it's so safe even I don't know where it is. Okay, I found it now. Don't panic, don't panic. Let's zoom you out a bit. That's better. Right, so in this bag I have the bezel lock there, and I've also got the other two screws for securing the back. Right, so let's get them in. As soon as I turn that camera on, I turn into a complete numpty. Oh dear, some people would say it's not the camera's fault. And it is not a requirement to have a camera on for that to happen. Right, so that's one screw in. I think that light's making it worse actually. Turn it off. It's a bit better. It's alright, I'm trying to film a black screw going into a black back plate with a black screwdriver. Perhaps not the best advised thing to do, is it really? Right, and it just remains to put the bezel lock on now. So that fits into a small locating dowel there and screws into the body of the instrument like this. So you can see I'm missing the little knurled sort of cap screw out of the top of the spindle, but I can make something up for that, or find something to use. So yeah, it's a lot better than it was, a lot smoother than it was. I think once I get that new return spring in there, it'll be even better. So very happy with my nice Mercer 10th DTI now, after I have refurbished it and rebuilt it. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. So before I go, I want to show you this little addition to my workshop. It's a calendar, and you remember some time ago now, back in, I think it was in Mil Resto 12, I said that I was going to be the recipient of a Heath Robinson award for using the scriber as a pry bar to remove an E-clip inside the gearbox. And I said I didn't know when I was going to be called forward to receive it, but here it is. And through the good offices of my my long-term friend Colin Gow, I have received my Heath Robinson award, and it's a Heath Robinson art calendar. And if you don't know who Heath Robinson was, I'll read what it says on here. It says Robinson, William Heath Robinson, 1872 to 1944. Robinson specialized in inventing modern apparatus to perform a regular task, no matter that the convoluted mechanism is way more complicated than the original simple method used. The modern world demands modern approaches to even the simplest of tasks. In Heath Robinson's universe, the fervent seriousness of the people involved in their often absurd tasks leads the viewer, even for a moment, to believe in them. And this device that we're looking at here, this elegant mechanism, is an elegant apparatus for lighting a cigar in safety from 1933. So yeah, I think a lot of what I just said there certainly can be applied to this workshop anyway. So there you go, there's my Heath Robinson award. Okay, so that's all we have time for this time out. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my little foray into the world of DTI refurbishment. As I said before, it's not intended to be a how-to. If you want that, then you need to look at the videos of Mr. Bob Dixon, and they reside on the platform of Double Boost's channel. Mr. John Mills, he has a playlist on there of about 6 or 7 films that Bob made in his workshop that show how to do what I just tried to do there, but to do it properly. So it just remains for me to say now, thank you very much again for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for all the new subscribers who've come along. I really appreciate your interest and you watching my films. And if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. It really helps me, and it's what keeps me going and makes me want to make new videos for you all. Okay, see you again soon. Bye for now.